Morning. Where is that thing? Okay. I'm still a bit jet lagged. I flew in from Tel Aviv, which is about 10 hours difference. So forgive me if I'm somewhere in a different zone right now. So which one is forward? Yeah, that's the one. Okay. So Jack asked me to do a short presentation, in other words, something that would be more like a TED talk. And I thought to myself how I can change an actual article which we wrote into something that would be more of a presentation. And it actually is interesting because it makes sense within the framework of the presentation itself, or the content of the presentation, because it is about forgetting and remembering. Now, to get an understanding what we're talking about, let me take you back quite a few years. Maybe not, I don't know how old people are. And there were those exams in school or university that we all studied for. And then, let's say, we studied for a week, we had to do the exam, and then, what do you remember of that today? Most of us just don't remember. I mean, I don't remember anything from my math tests. Nothing. It's completely wiped out. But it's even more interesting because how much did you remember just 1 week after? Well, you'd be surprised. You probably don't remember that as well because it's been so long. But it actually is interesting because of this. This guy, Hermann, is a German psychologist, and he was doing a lot of studies, Ebbinghaus, he was doing a lot of studies during the late 19th century about education. And what he was looking at is how quickly we learn things. There is the learning curve, how much we spend in order to learn, but also he was talking about how quickly we forget. And amazingly enough, it seems that we forget 50% of what we learned within 1 week of learning it. And unless we use all sorts of tools like repetition, like spacing, like doing micro sessions, just like they do in school. They don't give you the whole body of knowledge at the beginning, but you learn it over time, and then when you come to the test, you learn everything quickly. But that's what you do. You need to learn it over time in small doses, repeat the information until you can actually have it in, because then it's not your standard learning, it's more like training maybe, training your mind to get that information. Now, this is because memorizing is a skill. Some of us are really lucky. I mean, there's the people who see a picture, remember immediately, people who remember almost everything. They have special brains that can do it. I'm not that way. I have a horrible memory. I don't remember anything. If I didn't have my CRM, my email, my whatever, I would never remember anything. Okay? And in order for me to remember things, I need to find tools or try to find ways for me to remember. If I need to remember numbers, I try to sing them because it works on different registries in your brain. In other words, I'm trying to find ways for my brain to overcome the fact that I don't have a very good memory. Okay? Because memory is a skill. And it's amazing because, and this is something that I ran across a couple of months ago, because memory is a skill of the brain. It's something that the brain does. But if the brain changes, if something is causing our way of thinking to change, then what does that do with memory? What does that do for memory? Okay? So this is something that came out just a couple of months ago, and it has a very nice title. It says, scientists say Google is changing our brains. But it's a little bit more than that, because it's not just Google. The idea is that our brain is actually being trained or is slowly changing to do something else. For example, some of the things they found out was that if you use Google to answer something which is really difficult, which is a lot of us do that today, you're very likely to then go back to using Google for the simple stuff. So if normally you would maybe open a book, try to read the label or anything like that, you would go back to the internet and do it again. And the next stage of it is that we go on more and more relying on the internet to get that information. And what happens after that is we offload the information to the internet. So we understand that there is some sort of a cloud for our brain. Instead of keeping things on our own, just like we do with technology, we do that for the information that we need to use. And if you don't believe me, that the internet is impacting the way that we're learning and saving information and accessing it, tell me when was the last time you actually remembered a phone number? Okay? I mean, the moment we all had smartphone, when we lose our smartphone, it breaks down. You can see everybody on Facebook or whatever. Please send me back your numbers because I don't remember any of you. Okay? I mean, when was the last time you actually knew when someone's birthday was? I mean, I remember my wife's birthday. It's dangerous not to do that. But, and my kids as well, sort of. But honestly, we don't remember everything. We offload our memory to the cloud. So what we are being trained to do is to use our brain in a different way. And you can't really blame people for doing that because that is an internet minute. Unlike maybe, my father was a Renaissance man. He taught music at the university. He had a PhD in biology. He taught math and history and some other stuff as well. I don't even remember. And that was okay. But he didn't have to know CRM. He didn't have to know how to use different types of technology and stuff like that because the tools and the amount of information, everything that goes through people's brain these days is not the same as it used to be. CRM? CRM is the customer relation management software, the way that us, at least in sales, but quite a lot of other companies, manage the connection or the ongoing back and forth interaction with our customers. Okay? It's like a project management platform. It could be like, I mean, you could use Excel for that if you wish. You can also use your email software to remind you. It doesn't matter. It's a tool. It's just a software that helps you to do something, whether it's HRM, CRM, or any other tool. Okay? And the fact is that we need to remember all of these things, and these numbers are astounding. I mean, every year I look at that, they have the internet minute for 2015, 2014, but you need to look at these numbers, and it's ridiculous. I don't know if you understand. I'll just look at one of them. This is WhatsApp, okay? There are about 30 billion WhatsApp messages per day around the world. That includes babies. That includes, because, I mean, if we take that and we divide it by the number of people, which is about, what, 7.5, 7.4 billion people around the world, that would be 4 messages per person. Okay? And that does include the babies and the people who don't have phones. So you can imagine, I mean, if you try to find out, probably 16-year-old girls in high school would probably be sending half of it, but still, at the end of the day, this means that the amount of knowledge that we need to process, that goes through our minds, that we see every day, is crazy. It's not the same as it was 15, 10, 20 years ago. It's just different. The technology is different. The way that information is processed, the amount of data that we process is just different. And if that's true, and we're using our brain in a new way, then if memorizing is a skill, then the other skills that we're using now, they are also maybe equal to memorizing. We need to look at them in the same way. Because finding information on the internet is a skill. You need to know how to find, you need to find within time, you need to make sure that it is correct, so you need to sift through the information and recognize what you need now out of the information that you find. So all of these are skills that are taking the place of memorizing. Okay? The brain is, or it needs to start working in a different way. And what happens is that because of technology, because of the way the world is changing, the people who are coming in to this world are actually accessing that knowledge in a different way. Instead of memorizing it in school, they are using the ability to find the information and sift through it. So different skills for a different world. Now, this is part of the software that we sell, but it's not so much important for me right now. What is important for me is to show you this. This is how people actually think. This is how people actually act. Okay? I'll explain to you what this is. This is analytics about how people use support software. Okay? This is training software that teaches them how to do something, and we have analytics on how people have been using that content, and we can see that if at the beginning they are, I'll go this way, there's sort of a peak where everybody's just learning everything, then we can see over time how they go on using that same content or those same support tools to try and do it again. And the reason is that people do not use their memory in the same way. What does that mean? It means that you learn something, you get taught something, you put it into your sifting mechanism and you say, I need it now, I'll remember it. I don't need it, I'll put it aside. Now, if any of you here create content and are also in charge of support, they know they get about 1 million stupid support calls about things they've already taught and explained. Because people just don't want to remember. They say, I don't need it now, I'll just throw it aside. I need it again, I'll go ask that person. They don't have to answer anyhow. Okay? And this is what people do. They simply put it aside. And we can see that in our own analytics. We can see how people actually go back to that content because they say, I'm going to look at that again. This is the way the brain actually, or the way we use our brain changes. Okay? No longer memorizing, but looking at content, saying, I can use it, I can't use it, I'll sift it, I'll use it now. It's a different way of using our brains. Okay? Now, is that good or bad? People ask me if that is good or bad. Well, I don't know if it's good or bad. I can say that on a personal level, I have originally a master's in English literature, which is kind of strange in high tech, but I'm very happy with it, and I really like the fact that I know poetry, because I can use it when I need it, and that's really understanding human nature, and it helps me to tell my stories better, because I understand how stories should be built. But if we look at most of us, especially people who have kids, I have young kids, and I can always hear the parents complain about the fact that school is like a factory. They just teach them to remember things. They never actually give them tools. Why are they bothering them with remember all of that stuff instead of teaching them how to use tools? So on the one hand, we're complaining that we want people to memorize. On the other hand, we understand that that's not really the important thing. It's not only that, it's actually more interesting because we do look at schools. What do they teach us? They teach us something that we need to use afterwards. Okay? So if we just look back, how many people studied, let's say 40 years ago, to be iOS programmers? Okay? That's the software that runs mobile Apple phones. Probably not, because it was introduced in 2007. Okay, so the thing is that the fact that there are people now who can actually do that, it's because they were trained in learning how to use or how to program. At the end of the day, it is a skill set, it's a tool set, and then they simply translated that in that capability or those abilities to that new type of need or the job market that the job market offered. Okay, they made a lot of money at that time because there weren't that many people. So the people who actually had the skill set and not the knowledge were the ones who actually were able to make money off of that. I remember afterwards when they had Android, you wanted to find an Android developer, you'd pay thousands. You'd give him 5% of your company just to come in. Right now there's many more. But the idea was that the people who came in were not people who were taught that in school or in the university or even in some sort of vocational school, because it was just not there. People didn't even know that that's going to exist. And tell you the truth, people who are going to school right now, even people in 6th, 7th grade, the job that they will do in 10 years' time doesn't even exist now. Okay? So the question, is it good or bad? I don't know, it's up there. But we definitely need to think about how people are using their brain and not what they're using their brain for. Okay, so just to show you how true that is, GPS navigation for the public was introduced at around 2007. That was when mobile phones came in. So it was 2007 with iOS, with Apple, and 2008 with Android. It's more or less quadrupled the amount of GPS navigation units for the public. And that was only 10 years ago. But when do you remember doing that? Okay? You remember Dora at the beginning? She's using a map. Okay? So my kid asked me when he saw that, why isn't she using a GPS? And I told him I only have GPS in English and not in Spanish. So, but, you know, in Israel it's a bit different because Dora speaks Hebrew and then what would be Spanish here would be English. So they teach them English. So I told him she only speaks English, but that didn't work out because my GPS runs in English. But still, it's true. We have changed the way we live because of the change in technology and what it's done to us, to our lives, and that is less than 10 years ago. Now, the way that information is provided to people has changed the way they think. So the people who you are now giving content to, they don't think in the same way. I mean, everybody knows, you know, on the first day, the CEO of Mindcap who was here, he said, people don't use PDFs, okay? So, I mean, for me today, I never read manuals anyhow, but I'm one of those people. I like to see if it explodes and then if it works, it's okay, it's not bad. But today, I mean, I would go to YouTube and see a movie on how something is done, okay? And this is today. This has been maybe 2-3 years. That's not what's going to happen in 10 years' time. Again, because 10 years ago, people hadn't been using YouTube to learn how to do something. So what's going to happen in 10 years' time is different. And you are the people who are creating the content that people afterwards need in order to understand how to do something, in order to understand software. If the thought process changes, and it changes in a way that people offload information and access it only when they need it, then you as content creators need to have different skills because you need to provide it in a different way. And this is, I say it's a paradigm shift. Again, I'm not going to go into every level of what can be done. But what I am talking about is that you need to understand the type of things that is going on today and where you need to start pointing the technology that you're using within your own environment. And it's not so much about me or any other software provider pushing their knowledge. It's because people think in a different way. Now, it's very powerful because if you start providing that information to the people in these ways, and we'll talk about 5 or 6 of them. If we are providing the information to people in these ways, then we are actually strengthening the organization we're working for. It means that people will be using the software better. It means that employees would be less, how should I say, they would bother the support staff less. Okay, we're talking 50% of the work done there. It's just changing. So I'm just, you know, these are titles, but this is really what is being spoken about right now in content provision, in training, support material. You need to see that you're aware of the new tools out there, aware of where the market is going, because if you don't want to become irrelevant within 5 years, you need to know that. Someone else would do that if you don't go there. I'm not trying to frighten anyone, I'm just telling you how the world changes. Jack, do you agree? So it should be, you should look at technologies that provides you with contextual help. That means something that is relevant to the product when the user is using it, to the environment of that user when they are using it in a certain way. You should look at micro sessions. Again, people don't remember long things. People just remember short things. You need to give it to them in small bites. I mean, just like they use their phones, it's called bite-sized gaming, by the way. You need to give them bite-sized training. Okay? You need to give them small bites that they can access afterwards when they need it again. You need to provide them with rich content. It's just the way our brains work. We want to remember something, we need to be entertained. We need to have it work on several registries in our mind. When I see a movie, it's not just my brain that works, it's also my eyes that work. I record it in a different way. If I have a visual memory, I would remember it differently. So the richer the content that you can provide your customers with or your users with, everybody's a customer at the end of the day, it will help them to remember it. Okay? It's also something that they will be able to relate to. We're talking about augmented and virtual reality. This is really the next generation, especially in the technology field. Everybody's talking about that. And just to explain the difference, augmented reality is something that happens on top of the product and augments it. Okay? And virtual reality is actually something where you are immersed into that training. Okay? It doesn't fit everything. It doesn't fit every sort of technology, but it is there. So if you're talking about manuals that teach how to use a machine for industry, they're going to virtual reality. If you're talking about using software, they'd probably go to augmented reality. But just so you know, leading companies today in the education field, that's where they're going. And if you want it to really be strong, then you need two additional things. Okay, this is another direction that the market is going to. Personalized content, that means that the training that the user gets is specific to that user, because what A needs is not what B needs. And if you create content today, you normally create content which is just for everyone. But you need to make sure that the content provided, and it's going in that direction, is specific and relevant to the users in the way that they're using the product. A manager should not see the same thing as a technician, etc. Okay? And the next thing, and this is, I think, really powerful, the information gathered from how people interact with the product or with the training material should be measured, and that is really powerful for you, because this actually shows how what you are doing is giving back to the company. Okay? If you can measure the number of times somebody uses support material, you can go back to your manager and say, I just saved you 50% of your support calls. And you have proof. It's actual. So measurement, big data, that's something that you need to understand. Support, training, and onboarding technology is going to. Okay, so what did we have here today? Because I only have like 3 minutes left. We were talking about that dreaded exam, which you probably don't remember because we spoke about 20 minutes ago. See how memory works? And then we talked about Google changing our brains. Again, it's something that happened a long, long time ago, about 10 minutes ago. We're already somewhere else. I'm pretty sure that I'm reminding things to you right now because you don't remember. I'm repeating it so you will remember. Okay? And then we talked about a paradigm shift in the way that you need to provide content, and then about content strategies. And you know what's going to happen? You're going to go off stage, you're going to go back home, and you're probably going to forget. Thank you very much.
What's interesting, I feel, is how our concept of time is changing. Where just waiting, if I'm on a slow internet connection, I have to wait 30 seconds to get the information I need. You know, normally I'm used to getting it in 0.0025 seconds. So my tolerance for wait is changing. And yes, I too I tend to email myself things I need to remember, because if I don't write it down, I don't remember. So I definitely can relate to that concept.